David, who you're seeing there, you're the first CEO of Universal Music Russia, and your articulated effort was to build cultural bridges through music in a post-Soviet Russia. But I want you to tell first, to start, how you got into this, because you're a kid from the Midwest. You started in a rural farm. Was it Ohio, I think?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Tell everybody how you end up running a music company in Russia.
Well, first of all, Mark, thank you for having me on your show, and I hope you're feeling better.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And I was listening into the conversation about the toll bridge for the Golden Gate Bridge. And I remember back in the early 90s, I was riding a motorcycle across that bridge every day. And I think it was under $3, the toll back then in the early 90s. So I'm missing
something
those
has
good old
happened.
days.
Something has happened, David. It's out of control.
It is, but it's still one of the most beautiful bridges in the world to cross.
It's the most beautiful commute in America, I think. Yeah.
So I my start is on a family farm in Ohio. This is Ronald Reagan's America we're talking about. So it was the height of the Cold War, mutually assured destruction. We had a very important Air Force base not far from our farm, so we knew the Soviets were going to attack it right away if there was a first strike or a retaliatory strike. So we were going to be turned to ashes. That was just something you lived with in that area. And so I grew up with this fear of the Russians, frankly. And I even remember when their Olympic team cheated and beat our Olympic team in the 1972 Munich Olympics, the basketball team did. And that upset me. But I just, I had a lot of reasons to fear growing up a potential Soviet attack. And then when the Berlin Wall came down, I went to Berlin to see the Roger Waters concert there at the Berlin Wall that he staged. When Roger Waters left Pink Floyd in the mid-'80s, he said he would never perform the Wall album again unless the Berlin Wall came down. And he didn't take that seriously, that no one did. It seemed impossible. But lo and behold, by 1990, that Berlin Wall was coming down. And so he staged the biggest concert in the history of Europe right there on Potsdamer Platz. 500,000 people from all over Europe came, especially the newly liberated Eastern European countries. And I came because I was just the biggest Pink Floyd fan in my school or in anywhere that I knew of. I was just the biggest, and I was so excited to see that. But when I was there, I saw freedom breaking out. It was the most amazing thing I'd seen in my life. People who had been living behind the Iron Curtain under communism were now embracing capitalism, embracing democracy. And as an American, people wanted to know what was it like living in America, what the future could be here in Eastern Europe under capitalism. So I really enjoyed talking about that and explaining that. And so when I came back to America, I decided to learn Russian and get a business degree right there in San Francisco at San Francisco State. And I got an MBA there. And
Russian is not easy to learn.
It's tough.
And all the characters are different as well, right? All the letters are different.
That's right. It's a whole different alphabet. They have more letters in their alphabet than we do, the Cyrillic alphabet. And I tried to learn in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. There was a course at Berkeley I took, and there was some courses at San Francisco State. But you really need to be in the country to really, really understand the language and really benefit, from that breakthrough moment. And so I went back to Russia and got a job working for a record company called Polygram, which at the time was the largest record company in the world. And they were the first ones to open in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. They hired me, and then an American company called Universal Music ended up buying Polygram, and they became the largest record company in the world. And they made me the very first CEO, American CEO of a record company in Russia. So that's how I got my start from the farm.
Yeah, but as I remember in your book, you describe what is a less than friendly environment that record company executives, we think of them here, they're in Beverly Hills and they're fat cats in New York. And,
Easy life.
it's not that way in Russia at that time, especially. You describe a kind of mob infested world where your music is being pirated. It sounded to me very dangerous. And you said it was dangerous.
It was. The Russian Mafia controlled 90% of the music industry. So all the music was counterfeit CDs. The Russian Mafia had their own record labels. They were signing artists and developing artists just like a record label would, but it was all illegal proceeds and black money, and the money that was generated by the Russian Mafia was often used to fund terrorism or weapons trafficking or sex trafficking. So they were really bad guys, and they of course were stealing the rights from international artists and from Russian artists. And so the Russian music industry just wasn't developing at all. And that was my biggest challenge for Universal Music is creating a modern and legal music industry in the ashes of the fallen Soviet Union.
So, then, I mean, life takes a real ride for you. I mean, you pick up momentum quickly and life becomes super interesting.
Yeah, I got lucky with a couple of my signings. My first artist that I developed, an artist named Al Su, she went to Eurovision and finished second and ended up in the British pop charts. And so I had my first somewhat international success story. But then
I love that your co-author didn't know what Eurovision. I don't think he knew it, or is it?
No,
right?
it was me. I'm the one that didn't know.
Didn't know what Eurovision was. Eurovision is like. Tell everybody what Eurovision. I think everybody knows. Probably.
It's the biggest song contest in the world. It was on the scene long before American Idol and X Factor. This is
but it's really weird how we're so siloed here, because I didn't know it until I don't think I knew it until like 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
So the Will Ferrell movie, probably a lot of
probably to Will Ferrell. Yeah.
No, if it weren't for Eurovision, we wouldn't have ABBA. They broke through with Waterloo and went on to become one of the biggest bands of all time. And in Europe, it's countries compete with each other. And there's usually a TV audience of 300 million, and it's voting. Each of the countries votes for the winner by telephone or by jury. And that's why it's so fascinating. And that's why it was such a big deal for me to bring a Russian artist to Eurovision, because Russians had always done very poorly at this song contest. They even stopped trying. They had done so badly. But I brought this young 16-year-old girl to perform there, and it was her first performance for a live audience in her life. So she starts off performing for 300 million people, but she did brilliantly and almost won. But when she returned back to Moscow, she was a hero in the country.
So that kind of kicked the door open for you, but it didn't stop there. I mean, you then through that door, a lot of stuff happened.
Well, the next big band I signed was a duo called Tattoo. They were two girls from Moscow who were very controversial. They're in their video, they kiss in the video, and that was a very, very scandalous thing at the time. We're talking about 2000, 2001. But in Russia, homosexuality had been illegal under the Soviet Union, and even under the liberated Russia, it was still very much shunned upon, and there was a lot of repressive laws against the LGBTQ community. So it was a real risk signing this band to Universal. There's a lot of folks that told me not to do it, but we did it, and it turns out they became the biggest selling Russian act around the world in music business history, and still are to this day.
So by then, your life, it's interesting. It seemed to get successful and comfortable, but then, the whitewater rafting trip of what was happening in Russia seemed to affect it. And we have such little bit of time. I could talk to you for hours. I just think this is fascinating. But I wonder if you could talk about two things in the time, and you can do it any way you want. But in the time we have remaining, I really want to talk about how music was transforming life in Russia, the culture in Russia, as you were perceiving it anyway. Even the freedoms, the liberties that people, just what is communicated in music. That's what's so exciting about music. It's transcendent that way. And then how your world, though, began to have ups and downs as a result of changing politics in Russia.
So when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a tremendous hunger by Russians for Western pop music, for American pop music in particular. Before that, Beatles albums, Rolling Stone albums were bootlegged and snuck into the country. But now the doors were open, the invasion was happening, and it was a tremendous invasion of pop culture from the West, but in particular from America, and specifically hip hop and rap music, which is what I really worked hard on.
Right.
That really was a culture shock for Russians, and to this day, Russia has a very strong and thriving hip hop community. So it all really started with that first breakthrough, and Eminem's album, the Marshall Mathers LP, was really the breakthrough album that opened the door for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Jay-Z and Public Enemy and all the rest. But that music, along with Western, the other pop singers from Elton John, Mariah Carey, Enrique Iglesias, it really brought Russia and the West together. It was a bridge. It was a cultural bridge. And at that time, it felt like the sky's the limit. Superpower enemies are now friends. There will be peace on earth. And music is what's uniting us. I really had high hopes going into the new millennium. But then Boris Yeltsin just couldn't hang on. And the wars in Chechnya were bringing him down. He was drinking heavily, and it was just chaos, just pure chaos in the country. And that's when Vladimir Putin became president, and he changed things immediately. And he put Russia on an authoritarian track. He closed the independent media. He started harassing any opposition, any political opposition whatsoever, and it made life a lot harder, a lot more dangerous for me too. On top of that, there was a wave of terrorism that was rocketing Russia. And that's what finally got to me. I had spent all those years fighting against the gangsters and the oligarchs and the pirates, but it was the terrorists that finally drove me out of Russia for the first time.
Yeah, it was too dangerous for your family, is what you said.
It was just dangerous, and the Russian security forces were unable to protect their citizens. And we saw that just a few months ago repeat itself in Moscow. So nothing has changed in those 25 years.
On balance, how long were you there?
15 years altogether.
Gosh, that's just it's a lifetime when you think about all of the things that happened during that time and all of the acts you brought through. Mariah Carey, Metallica, right? Sting is one of them, I think.
Sting, Bon Jovi, Elton John, Bryan Adams, all the big ones you've heard and listened to. They at one point made their first trip to Russia.
And was there reluctance on the part of artists at all, or were artists excited about playing the new Russia,
I think every artist is excited about playing a new venue, but to play in Moscow is extra special because we had been kept out of Russia for so long, and now for them to come and realize they have fans, they have a lot of Russian fans. It was a big deal for them. Who it wasn't a big deal for was their managers or their promoters, because they were quite scared. Russia was a very dangerous place. Sometimes there was an incident where David Copperfield did some shows in Russia, and they wouldn't let him take his equipment back out. So he had to end up canceling a European tour because of that, because he didn't pay bribes to the right people. So there was always danger, there was always chaos and problems. And if you're an artist manager or a record label or promoter, you're more hesitant than, say, the artist. But the artists loved coming to Russia, and they loved walking on Red Square for the first time. I'll never forget seeing Mariah Carey's face when she saw St. Basil's Cathedral for the very first time. It was really incredible.
You had to do business with some of those underworld guys to get stuff done, right?
Yes, yes. They were very involved in the music industry. In fact, the band that I signed, Tattoo, that went on to become the biggest selling band ever for Russia, their first single was owned by a gangster record label. The manager of Tattoo had sold it off, the first song. And that was the big hit song. And without that, there might not even have been a band or an album or an international success. So I had to negotiate with Gangsters and give them an offer they couldn't refuse.
David, you did also build out from Russia to Ukraine, right?
Yes. Yes, it's one of my proudest moments. I learned very quickly that Ukraine has always been in the shadows of Russia in all respects, but particularly culture. And the music industry was entirely controlled from Moscow for Ukraine, for the former Soviet Union, for the entire region. But we at Universal realized, hey, that's a music market in Ukraine. Let's set up its own music industry there and have them develop their own artists and of course help sell and promote international artists in Ukraine, just like we're doing in Russia. So I helped open the very first Universal music office in Kiev in 1999. And that was the first step. Then a lot of other record labels followed. And eventually Ukraine got its own modern music industry side by side with the Russians.
It's all the tougher then to watch Ukraine endure the aggression from Russia, I'm sure. I'm sure you have friends, colleagues, and it's heartbreaking, I'm sure.
I do. It breaks my heart very much. It's one of the great tragedies of this century. And I went to Ukraine a year ago in May to see those colleagues and friends and see how they were holding up after a year of war. And when I was there, I realized they're fighting not just for territory, they're fighting for their culture. And they're fighting for justice, too. There's been a tremendous amount of war crimes, terrible war crimes committed during this war. And I visited a village in the suburbs of Kiev called Bucha, where some of the very first war crimes were uncovered. And I write about it in the book, how this really shook me to the core. And I realized I had been helping for the past 30 years a country, Russia, build bridges, cultural bridges with the West. And now this country was terrorizing its neighbor, Ukraine. And so that was a real moment for me to realize maybe I've been wasting my entire life and all my efforts helping the wrong country. And that's why I'm so committed to helping Ukraine now survive this war and resist.
David, your book is terrific. It's so personal and reflective and well done, with a shimmer of celebrity and underworld. It's just terrific. Congratulations. Whoever wrote it with you is to get that some plaudits along the way here.
Absolutely. Fred is a terrific writer, and we had a lot of fun putting this together. And he's a real expert on the Billboard charts and anything in the music business. So that's why this is a really interesting book, not just for folks who like Russian culture or history, but people who enjoy reading music industry stories.
Oh, yes, very much music industry stuff, and I'm sort of half kidding about Fred too, because he's very accomplished in the music world, and so it's so cool that he's a music journalist, and he also had this ability to work with you, and you collaborated so beautifully on this book, man. I wish you the very best on it. Rockin' the Kremlin.
Thank you so much.
We'll have a link to it in both the breakout video and in the main podcast. But congratulations, and I hope we talk again, David. As I said,
thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
All right, David Shank, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.